All right, it's that fun part of the year. OTAs are starting, everything's starting, but now everybody's talking about these things, and we know sometimes these storylines that happen in the offseason are overblown, underblown. Some teams fly under the radar, some teams are more represented on the radar than they should be. So it's time to play a game of overrated or underrated with my guest G Bush here. G Bush from 92.3 The Fan. How you doing today, man?
Hey man, I'm always willing to play the games, man. Family Feud, Jeopardy, Yahtzee, Scrabble, Uno. I'm ready to play the game.
He is a old school tabletop gamer. He is. All right. So how we're going to do this is we're going to go through about 5 topics. Both of us are going to sound off on each topic, and we're just going to decide, is this topic or is this conversation or narrative over or underrated, or team over and underrated. And we're going to start with an interesting one for us Browns fans to talk about: the 2021 Steelers. G Bush, over or underrated?
I would say they're underrated myself. Because I just go by my colleagues. Adam the Bull is like, he feels like they're gonna fall off a cliff, like they're gonna win 4 games. Jonathan Peterlin thinks he's gonna win 4 games, and I just keep coming back to it. I said, man, the Steelers won 8 games with Duck Hodges. They were Duck Dynasty got 8 wins. So this year, are they the best team in the AFC like they've always been in contention for the last 15, 20 years? No, that's not what their upside is. Their upside is not a place where you can actually do that. But are they an individual group? Are they a group of people that still have pieces? Do they still have TJ Watt? Sure. Do they still have a really great receiving core? Yes, they do. Is Big Ben what he was before? No. But the Steelers are the Steelers. They drafted a running back in the first round. It looks like they're going to try to get back to the revitalization of what they do best and not have Big Ben throw the ball 40 or 50 times a game, because we know what that looks like. We understand that that's not a possibility anymore. But I'm under no circumstances going to pick the Steelers to be 4 and something or 2 and something. I think they'll hover around 500, a game below, game above maybe. But they will undoubtedly beat some teams that people didn't think they would beat. You shouldn't guess it. Mike Tomlin does this every year. So I'm going to go with underrated.
See, on this channel, I have made a history of saying this is the year where the Steelers are going to die. And then they go 8-8 with Duck Hodges. And I go, no, okay. For real. Ben's like this. He has the elbow. There's no way they're going to be good this year. 6-10. This is the year they implode. They go 11-5. Albeit, I'm kind of glad they went that 11-5 in hindsight, right? But
Right.
with the Steelers, I think this has been the summer of memes for them. I have not seen them have such a low PR type year than they've had this year, to the point where I'm like, they should probably do Hard Knocks just so people can get off their back and stop roasting them this entire time. But yeah, I think they're underrated at this point now. Now, there are still those hanger-ons and the Steeler fans who are like, they should be favored to win the division still. And that's ridiculous, right? But that's not what the national conversation is about the Steelers. It's more or less, why are they starting Big Ben? They haven't really done anything splashy. They're not going to be that good this year. I think they'll be in playoff contention, right? They'll be in that wild card conversation all year. In the AFC, it seems like you got to win like 11 games to make the playoffs. So I don't know if they win that many games, but I can see where they could win 10 or what would be the equivalent to 10 now. You know what I mean? Since they have that extra.
Working on that.
Yeah, it's like, I can see where they could have one of those funky records where they're like 10-7 or like a 9-7-1 or 9-8. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to be below 500. And I get the hesitancy with Big Ben. Look, I think one of 2 things is going to happen with Big Ben. Either he is humbling himself and finally going to decide that the Big Ben offense does not need to be played everywhere, because everybody talks about Randy Fichtner and what he took away from that offense, play action and throwing too much, right? They blame that on Randy Fichtner. The year before, when they had Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph out there, they threw 100 less times between 4 quarterbacks in 1 less game than Big Ben did for 15 games. And, they ran like 40 more play action plays than they did with Big Ben. So a lot of this is Big Ben and him and his refusal to kind of let go of his style of offense, because sometimes the presence of a player can outweigh his ability on the field. I think it's up to him to have that conversation and understand that. And if he does, then they'll be a much better team and they'll be a playoff contender. And if he doesn't, I think they'll just give him the boot. And I think they'll be fine with Mason. Well, I want to preference what I mean by fine with Mason Rudolph. I think they'll be good enough to be over 500 with Mason Rudolph if they have to move him to the bench, Big Ben, in that conversation. So I think they are underrated at this point. I think people have drastically overestimated what their floor could be. One topic that's kind of recent that people have been over the moon about is this Julio Jones to Tennessee move. Is this move overrated or underrated, GBUSH?
I'm going to go with overrated. For me, the place where Julio Jones should have went, and this is why I just really feel like the marriage of Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay is just done. If you see Julio Jones out there in the market and you are Aaron Rodgers and you're like, I got Devontae Adams, to me is probably the best receiver as far as being well-rounded, like can do everything. He's not a burner, but his footwork, his route running, his hands, he's a savant when it comes to the game. If you can get Julio Jones and you got the running backs that they got over there in Green Bay, that's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer that you give me a guy like Julio Jones and I want to do my thing. So I'm looking at it like this. Julio Jones goes to Tennessee, and I look at it like, okay, Ryan Tannehill is the crux of what we're talking about. Ryan Tannehill, you got a line, you got a monster in the backfield. You got AJ Brown, who looks like a young monster. So yes, you do get two big body guys, but is Ryan Tannehill going to give you what you need to do to get you over the hump? Because to be truthful, Tannehill to me has played over his talent level over the last 3 years. Got a big deal. Salute to him. He resurrected his career. But if I'm going into a playoff game and Ryan Tannehill needs to throw the ball 40 times, I'll take my chances with about 15 to 20 other quarterbacks over that. So if they can work him in, play action, and do whatever they need to do, it may yield some results. But at this point, I'm a little. I think that move is overrated in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with overrated as well. And my big thing when we're talking about this move is which Julio Jones are we talking about anymore, right? We looked at somebody who was drafted in the same draft as him, and AJ Green, who looked like he completely fell off a cliff in Cincinnati. Now, some people can attribute that to different issues he had with the coaching staff, but I mean, my guy Ace Boogie, he's a big Bengals guy that he saw it all season. It was bad. It was real bad how he fell off a cliff in that season. And, if you look at Julio's numbers from last year, look, he didn't play a full season, but even if you average them out per game and compare him to Corey Davis, they're not even as good as Corey Davis's number, who he's going to be replacing there in Tennessee. So you have to ask yourself, at this point of Julio's career, how much of an upgrade is he to Corey Davis, if he is an upgrade at all at this point of his career? Now, I know it's crazy, right? Because I think what happens with a dude like Julio or sometimes with somebody like AJ Green is we tend to think of them as the last time we remembered those players in the spotlight when they go to kind of an obscure situation or the team starts to stink for a little bit. Atlanta, I think a lot of us think about the Falcons that were in the Super Bowl. Julio made an amazing catch to get him right in the range, and then they just blew it. They just blew it.
Oh,
and
boy.
Yeah, and then none of that was Julio's fault. But I think that's the Julio Jones we all think of. But I don't know if that's the Julio Jones that is still playing right now in the NFL. And he's up there in age. 2011, when he was drafted, that was 10 years ago. There's not a ton of 10-year plus vets in the NFL still operating at that high level that they once were. And I think at this point now we're talking about a very popular, well-known number 2 receiver. And, a lot of things Julio could do well was about his explosive athleticism. How much of that does he have left? Is he the type of player that could fall off a cliff? Because I was shocked that AJ Green fell off a cliff because his game really wasn't around athleticism. I thought he'd be one of those players that could play forever. But Julio Jones, if there's somebody whose game is apt to fall off a cliff, it is Julio Jones. And I think not a lot of people are considering that when they're talking about what he can do with Tennessee and all the attention that Derrick Henry's going to have on that offense. I get it, but I just don't know if this is still Julio Jones at this point. And maybe he could prove me wrong and he could bring a whole new dimension to that Tennessee offense. But, I just don't know if this is the Julio Jones that we all I grew up with and know and love. I don't know if this is the same dude. But next question we're going to get to when it comes to overrated, underrated, we're going to talk about another team here. I think we're going to go around the north. The Bengals. Overrated or underrated, GBUSH?
I think the Bengals is I think they actually underrated, man. Joe Burrow, man, he's nice. Before he got hurt, they was throwing the ball dang near every play. Mm-hmm. and he was just like, okay, cool. I'll drop back 60 times and I'm gonna keep throwing it. I'm like, this dude is we watched him come into Cleveland last year. And that game that came to Cleveland, it was a primetime game. And I'm like, this kid he ain't missed yet. He ain't missed yet. I mean, he out here doing his thing. And this ain't no walk in the park. I think Joe Burrow, when you get him Jamar Chase, you get, obviously you got Tyler Boyd, obviously. You got the kid from Clemson that they got a couple years ago. T. Higgins, still got Mixon. I think the Bengals, in my opinion, once again, will beat a few people that they should not have no chance of beating. On paper, there's a lot of people going, they may actually lose a little money on these games, right? If you want to lose your money, bet on NFL games. I always tell people that. These games are unpredictable, and I think the Bengals are going to get a couple people. I like what they got. As a matter of fact, if Joe Burrow wasn't hurt, or if he didn't get hurt last year, I think the whole world would be higher on the Bengals because they would have had an opportunity to see him the whole year and the progression that he'll have. I think the Bengals will be a great offense. I think where they'll struggle is the defense. And I think that sets a lot of teams apart. But the Bengals, to me, looking at their roster, I think they're underrated.
See, I've had an interesting ride with the Bengals. I've been on that Bengals are underrated train for a couple of years. But I'm sorry, Bengal fans. I'm going to have to say y'all a little overrated at this point. Now, this might be because I'm real close to the Bengals nation, and I see them all the time. I do a lot of things with Ace. And I hear what diehard Bengal fans are saying. And some of this stuff, it's wild. It is wild. But, it's that wild optimism that you sometimes, I remember Browns fans doing the same thing about, Bekevious Mingle going to work his way up in there. But, if I look at what they did in the offseason, right?
Come on.
if I look at what the Bengals did in the offseason, right? They replaced Carl Lawson with Trey Henderson. I think that's a downgrade. And then, they have a lot of great pieces on offense. I won't take anything away from them on offense, right? They got all those pieces. Don't love what they did with the offensive line, but you got a ton of wide receivers out there. But you have not really the greatest protection in the world for Joe Burrow. And I don't think more receivers was the answer. I think more linemen was honestly the answer. And I think they kind of half-stepped it when it comes to solutions on that offensive line. Joe Mixon is somebody who, he's always talked about as one of the better running backs in football. I'm waiting for him to have one of those seasons. It's been a while now. He has not really he's had good seasons. He's had over 1,000-yard seasons. He hasn't had one of those breakout seasons that put him in that top 5 conversation of running back like a lot of people were expecting him to be. And with Joe Burrow, I'm interested to see what he looks like under a full season because there were samples of him that looked great last year. There are also some samples of him that looked a little questionable last year. If you look at the Ravens game and the Steelers game, there were some questionable moments, and that's where you start to wonder about his arm strength. Now with the whole division and the Browns defense being upgraded, he's going to have 2 more games against tough defensive opponents to see really what he is on that front. And I think also the biggest question mark with the Bengals, and the reason why I just can't continue to be on this train, they still have Zach Taylor as their head coach. And look, Zach Taylor is the luckiest man in all of football. How this man still has a job, I don't know, but he still does. I mean, this is a dude who was hired in the class of Freddie Kitchens, and Freddie Kitchens was the only thing not making the Bengals look. Freddie Kitchens was so bad and such an embarrassment that it kind of engulfed everything else for all the other head coaches that were hired that year, to the point where they just got a free pass. But, Zach Taylor, he's been awful there at head coach at multiple moments for multiple seasons. He has not been somebody you had looked at and seen any real promise from. They continued to keep him. I don't get why. And as long as he's there, I think there is a hard cap on the potential of the Cincinnati Bengals, where I want them to be a playoff contender. I want them to get over 500. I just don't think they can with Zach Taylor at head coach. Next topic we're going to talk about, over or underrated, the Baltimore Ravens.
Man, see, that's just tough. I mean, I would, I don't like straddling fences. I would say if I could straddle, I would say they're rated accurately. I would say they are where they're supposed to be, but I don't believe in doing that. I hate when people do it. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna actually say overrated. And hear me out on this. So the Ravens, yes, they did go out and do some stuff. They got the kid from Minnesota, Bateman. They've not had a receiver ever. They still got Hollywood Brown. J.K. Dobbins will probably be the full-time running back this year. Them losing Brown as a tackle, for me, that's a blow. When you talk about, they said it like it was just great. Yeah, we're going to just swap him out. We're going to give him to Kansas City. And then that, to me, what really makes Baltimore really, really great is the fact that they were running the ball and they were using concepts that people did not have the personnel to do. They didn't have the personnel to stop what they were running. When you looked at what they were doing with Greg Roman, and they was running that read option, and they had all these different play actions and different things, after that, I think Kansas City kind of exposed them a little bit, right? If you get the Baltimore Ravens down, if you get them to a point where they're down 14-3 or 17-7, they're not a quick strike offense. They're not an offense that's going to run no points up we got to watch out. If you up 17-7 on the Chiefs, so what? It's 0-0. You got to be acting like it's 0-0. But when I watch the Ravens, they're a good team. I like some of their defensive guys, especially Marlon Humphrey. But when it comes to the offense, my thing is, we all know this. At some point, you will meet somebody, and they are going to make you throw the ball. My question is, can you comfortably drop back 25-35 and complete 65, 66, 70%, and do what you need to do in a playoff, in a tough spot? I just don't know if Lamar Jackson can do it. I know he has the capabilities athletically. I think he works hard, but if you're asking me to split hairs between overrated or underrated, I would go with, for the Ravens, they're a little tiny bit overrated.
Now, if you're asking me this about Eric DeCosta, I would say he's massively overrated at this point, their GM. But you ask me about the Ravens, I think they're slightly overrated. The reason I think Eric DeCosta has been overrated is, this is the least aggressive I've ever seen a team in a Super Bowl window with a MVP quarterback on a rookie deal ever. This is remarkably non-aggressive. I mean, they've lost more players than they've added, right? You talk about Earl Thomas, they had to leave him behind. Now, he hasn't been picked up by any other team. It's not like they have a great loss there, but still, you started this off of Earl Thomas and Orlando Brown, and now you don't have Earl Thomas and Orlando Brown. He's on your main competitor that you traded him to. And I think the reason I'm putting them at overrated is because the solutions for some of their issues last year, I just don't think are good enough. Specifically, that right tackle solution. Alejandro Villanueva. I know if anybody here listens to Joe Thomas, he stresses this. The hardest thing on the offensive line for a veteran offensive lineman to do is switch sides. It is not simple. And for him to go right to left or left to right, and he's never played right tackle a day in his life at the age of 31, I think they're asking way more than what he's going to be capable of doing. I mean, this is somebody who seemed to be on the decline, was not brought back to a Steelers team that offensive line was terrible last year. So if they thought highly of him, they would have at least tried to bring him back in at the same number the Ravens were able to. And now you're going to ask him to pretty much play on his other hand. I don't know about that. That doesn't seem like it's going to work well. And he wasn't a great run blocker, but maybe you have ways of scheming that out, right? And then when it comes to Lamar, look, I don't really have any questions about Lamar, but I think a lot of hype is going to this running back room for Baltimore. And I like J.K. Dobbins. I like Gus Edwards. I think we're kind of elevating them a little bit more than what they have earned at this point. And the wide receivers, I like some of the potential there, but this is unproven. And this is with the least wide receiver friendly. You have a ton of young wide receivers. Let me stress that. In the least wide receiver friendly offense in football right now. Like if you hold all the wide receivers in the NFL, they would tell you that Greg Roman's offense is the least wide receiver friendly. And you have to be a technician to be able to dominate in that offense. I mean, Greg Olsen and Steve Smith are the two main guys who are able to dominate in that offense. One's a tight end who that offense kind of caters to, and Steve Smith, I mean, he's a technician, like a Hall of Fame level technician. So I think it's a real tough ask for Rashard Bateman to just have that kind of an impact when this isn't an offense that's going to be geared towards helping him. Defensively, they're fine. They're going to be really good defensively. They're always really good defensively. They lost some of their edge players, but Baltimore gets that benefit of the doubt when it comes to their edge players because who was Matthew Judon, when he took over for when he took over for what's his name, Zadarius Smith out there. Yeah. So we didn't know anything about them until, they were pushed to that role. So I assume they're going to have some decent edge guys. It's just the offense. I think they have not been aggressive enough in adding pieces around that offense and trying to help their quarterback get better. And again, name me another team that has been less aggressive in their Super Bowl window with a quarterback. Like if you look at the Buffalo Bills, they brought in Stephon Diggs. They were extra aggressive. They got their guy. The Cleveland Browns have been the poster child of aggressiveness, right?
Aggressive.
They started before Baker really even got there with Jarvis Landry. Now they got Odell. They brought in all these guys. They have been uber aggressive in that contract, in that rookie contract period. And then you look at the Baltimore Ravens. They got Kevin Zeitler, they got Calais Campbell. They made a lot of moves on defense, but they've really done very little when it comes to trying to be aggressive in that rookie deal for Lamar Jackson right now. And it's just questionable that they're doing that. So I would say slightly overrated, but I'm gonna just tell Raven fans right now, you're not gonna be happy with this. I think Eric DeCosta, he is massively overrated, and he's benefiting from a lot of Ozzie Newsome's work. Lamar was an Ozzie Newsome draft pick, so now we're gonna go to one that could shake some leaves in Browns Nation, or probably not. Nick Chubb, overrated or underrated?
I think. To me, Nick Chubb is definitely probably underrated. To me, if the Cleveland Browns just said, look, we're going to just have one running back, we going to run you to death, and we're going to keep you as a third down back. Nick Chubb can be a third down back too. It's just the fact that he's not as good as Kareem Hunt as a third down back, so he doesn't see those touches. But I think overall in the league, he's underrated, especially on this roster. We talked about it. How many players would you have to get to before you even mention Nick Chubb, right? You'd have to get through, potentially 5-6 players, either on the offensive side of the football and the defensive side of the football, before you even get to Nick Chubb. And because he is in the backfield with probably one of the other best running backs in the league, one of the questions you should say is Kareem Hunt overrated or underrated? Because Kareem Hunt on another team could probably get 1,200-1,300 yards, right? So I think he's done it before. I think when you look at Chubb, one of the things that always hurts Nick Chubb is he's splitting carries. There's other receivers that we got out there that are 12, 13, $14 million. We got tight ends. We got all of these different pieces and parts. And so obviously, what point in time are you going to say, is Nick Chubb going to legitimately get 16, 1,700 yards when you got all these other weapons and all these other people that they spread the ball around? I don't think that's going to happen. But on talent, on what he does, and I think one of the things that really he doesn't say very much. Like he could get a whole lot more money if he just would just talk. He need to hire somebody just to be like, hey, I'm going to be your stunt double. You're going to go play football, and then I'm going to do the press conferences for you. Let me
need Bobby the Brain Heenan out there.
Yeah, Pinky in the Brain. Let me be a Pinky. What are we going to do today? Everything we do, same thing we do every day. Take over the world. Like Nick Chubb, you need to talk. But if he talked more, if he did some other things a little bit, more aggressively, I think it'll work. But on talent, yeah, he's underrated. I don't think people know how good he is at this point.
Yeah, I think he is underrated. And I'm saying this specifically because I've seen too many rankings of running backs, whether it be Pro Football Focus, CBS Sports, that are putting Nick Chubb 6, putting him 5. There is only one person that you can make the argument to me that I would listen to that is better than Nick Chubb, and that's Derrick Henry. And I think even then it's debatable who's the better running back at that point. I think it's those two and then everybody else. But I keep seeing Christian McCaffrey put ahead of him. I keep people saying don't sleep on Saquon. He could be better. Like all these arguments that just don't make any sense. Dalvin Cook, I saw one where Dalvin Cook was over Nick Chubb, and it's like, wow, man. I mean, yeah, Alvin Kamara, and it's like, wow, I get that Nick Chubb's not the flashiest guy in the world, but he's somebody who could do those receptions. He's done the receptions before. He scored on a halfback screenplay against Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
So he can do that. He can do everything that you say Christian McCaffrey can do, right? When it comes to running the ball. And yeah, he's not the receiver that McCaffrey is, but he's such a better runner than McCaffrey that it almost doesn't matter. Because if you get Nick Chubb the ball in space, he don't got to run no route to get 20 yards. He just got to run straight. Nobody's tackling him. So yeah, Nick Chubb's underrated. Like the fact that he is not shoe-in for this, that the conversation is not exclusively Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb, who's the best running back in football, that it keeps people keep trying to involve all these other running backs when they are not in the same stratosphere as Nick Chubb. And again, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry. And this is why when you talk about a contract for Nick Chubb, and look, I am somebody who has been on the you shouldn't draft linebacker super early. I'm somebody who's on the, you got to be careful with the money you give running backs. But you have to make exceptions, right? I always say with linebackers, if you think somebody could be a Darius Leonard type linebacker, you take him wherever you think you could take him. That's why I was like, JOK, wherever you could take him, awesome. Take him wherever you can. Trade up for him if you want to. Same thing for Nick Chubb, right? Nick Chubb is a different level running back. Like he ain't one of these other disposable guys that you could pluck off and get better. Like he ain't Todd Gurley or something like that.
Right.
He is much better than that. He is the best running back in football, and well, in my opinion. And I think people are forgetting that because he didn't have the huge, the year before he had like 1,500 yards with a terrible offensive line. And he didn't have those huge numbers because the Browns, one, didn't require him to have those huge numbers. And two, he split carries. And also he was hurt most of the year. Well, he was hurt for like 4 or 5 games during the year. So, his numbers suffered because of that, but his play was better. He averaged more yards per carry. Like he got more receiving yards. Like he's gotten even better as his career has gotten on. And again, the fact that this conversation isn't exclusively Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb, who's the best running back in football, is insulting to Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, they're the only 2 running backs in football that you can say you can give them a second contract. You give them whatever you want, and that ain't a mistake because they are that much better than any other running back in football. Both drafted in the 2nd round, by the way, which doesn't give first-round running backs great pause. Yeah. But both drafted in the 2nd round. I understood why Nick Chubb went in the 2nd round because he had the ACL injury. Don't understand why Sony Michel ever went before him. Even at the time they did that, didn't get that. I never understood Derrick Henry not going earlier. Like, I get it. He wasn't the fastest guy coming up. I was always a big Derrick Henry fan. With him coming out of Alabama, never understood why he slipped so far in the draft for somebody as talented as him. But that's going to bring an end to our overrated, underrated game. G, you want to say anything before I head out?
Yeah, man. That is, boy, I tell you, hey, these storylines are going to be jumping all year. I mean, the great thing about the Browns is you could be doing the same thing all year long with different storylines, different players. You know, as always, you know what we are here at the Browns Nation. We America's team. Like, get ready for the hate. Don't pay attention to some of the storylines. People just be hating. But you can check me out on 92.3 The Fan. You can check me out from 8 to 12 on the Odyssey app, or you could just do old school, be in your car, man, and subscribe to the Barbershop YouTube page.
Definitely, guys. Check that out. And again, guys, thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, ding that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content coming up during the season, because, you know, I drop a ton of it. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.